Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Jack, this is Jackson.
Hi.
Firstly, before we start, we just want to thank Sony for putting this on. Who here is a Sony user?
Michaels.
And Michaels.
Quite a few of you.
Ooh. Who here will be a Sony user later today?
It's worth a shot.
We'll try. So just so you know, we've got a bunch of gear up the back that Chris will be showing people around after this. Cool.
A bit of play, get your hands on it, all that type of stuff.
Try it out. Cool, so we run Oneheart Studios. About 7 years ago, one of Jackson's friends was like, oh, I'm getting married. You guys are nerds. Can you film our wedding?
Had absolutely no idea what we were doing. Gave it a shot. Went okay.
And from there, so he filmed it, and then he goes, I don't know how to edit. And I was like, well, I do. I studied television. And yeah, so we started shooting weddings, and now we've shot over 200 weddings, and this is what we do for a career, and we absolutely love it. So we met in school, so that's nerds from school, running the production, all that, everything, all that fun stuff. We started out on DSLR, which was
interesting.
Which was a good change when we moved. We'll say that much. So as well as weddings, we've done short films, documentaries, music videos, corporate branding videos. So we do about 50 weddings a year, but that's our passion. But we also, in the weekdays, we edit, but also do projects. We're just going to show a bit of our work, about 3 minutes, and then we'll go from there.
I'm not gonna let you. Cool, so that's, thank you.
So all the stuff you saw there was all shot on Sony gear, and we were very early adopters of the mirrorless, kind of full frame mirrorless thing. Jack, so we worked out yesterday, it was 5 years ago yesterday that we picked up our first A7S. And pretty much Jackson said, hey, there's this cool thing coming out, I really believe it's going to be awesome. And I'm like, you're an idiot, 5D3s are the best thing in the world. That night, we went to the city and we did a test shoot. I got home, put it in my computer, and we ordered our second S the next day because it just changed the way we could capture light. So we stopped, so for our wedding work, we used to have to light everything, receptions, like speeches, everything. You just had to just add so much light and just be so present. And the Sonys really let us just kind of move a little bit more into the background, just up the ISO and just really just do something that we couldn't do before. Then there's obviously the image quality, dynamic range, all that is just, it was just insane. And everyone was just blown away. 18 months later, the S2 came out. And with IBIS, which is inbuilt image stabilization, we just stopped using monopods. So now everything we shoot is handheld the whole day, apart from the ceremony where no one wants to use a 200mm lens handheld. But we pretty much, I just all day walk around with two cameras, a 35 and a 50, and we literally just, we walk around, it gives us the freedom to move and add emotion into our shots without having to carry all this gear, gimbals and sliders and all this stuff around. It's just changed the way we do our work. And our whole, like you've seen our style, basically our whole thing with weddings is we want to create movies that when the couple watch it back, that they just relive those moments. It just brings back all those emotions. And we truly believe that Sony has, the cameras we use have shaped what we create. And as you've seen, it's lots of movement, lots of fun, and all those kind of things. Not long ago, so we've got, what was it? 10 Sony bodies at home. So we've kind of moved through them a lot. Now we use 7.3s, which just took everything to the next level. It was just crazy. I manually focused for 6 years. Everything was manual focus. I now autofocus everything, and I focus on all the other thing I'm meant to be doing. And it lets me be creative, and just like mid-ceremony, I'll just put the camera here, I'm playing with the joystick, I know where the person is, shot a person crying mid-ceremony. It's those kind of things that the gear lets you do. Apart from that, the colours on the S and the S2 were good, the colours on the 7.3 are even better. And having dual cards. So that's just, as a professional, that we are doing something that we can't relive, we can't redo. So having that security is real nice. So who here who is video, who's photo? So say photographers, put your hand up. Cool, mostly video people and both. Cool. So we're pretty much just going to go through just a few things, just a few basic tips for people who especially have these cameras and want to be able to do what we do, because we use the same gear as you guys. Like we use A7 IIIs and 1.4 primes. And all my friends are photographers, they use the same gear, and they're always asking me, how do we get it to look like that? It's all about how you set up the camera. So this is the very first thing. They come stock in program auto. So I had a friend the other day who's like, oh, I'm trying to shoot some video, but my controls aren't working. This is the first thing, you've got to set it to manual. It's that simple, but it makes all the difference. So the way you'd use your camera as a photographer, your shutter speed, f-stop, and an ISO, this is how it lets you use the same way. Cool. And then, so now we've got our file formats. So the Sonys record in either 4K or 1080. what we personally do is if we're doing interviews, if we're doing anything we know we don't ever need to slow down, we'll go 4K. Because you get that extra pixels and it just looks gorgeous. As you've seen in our videos, we love slow-mo. We love adding movement to our shots. And that's why we personally, so if we want anything, if there's a chance I might need to slow it down, I'll use 1080 and we go to 100. If you need better autofocus, 50 has a better face tracking, but that is, it's with frame rates, you've really just got to decide what you want to use it for and how that's going to suit your purpose best. So yeah, interviews, if you're not going to slow an interview down, 25p. If you're any dance floor stuff, I do a lot of 50p because with 100 lights can flicker. And that kind of thing. So,
sorry, I don't know what that is. Can you explain that terminology?
Yes. So 25p is real time. So for POW in Australia, we use 25 frames a second, which is basically everything. So if you put that into your editing software, that is real time. With 50 frames a second, you're halving the speed in post. So that's half slow-mo. Does that make sense? So you're recording twice as many frames. So when you put it into your editing, it plays at half the speed.
So hang on, power in Australia is 50 hertz, so 50 cycles per second?
25 frames a second. Hertz and frames a second are different.
Okay.
Yeah.
To do with old interlaced technology.
Yes.
So P is frames per second?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, progressive.
Okay.
But yeah. And then 100 is 25% the speed. Yeah, so we use 100p. We'll show an example. So this is just, so our whole way of using these cameras is we love the freedom that it provides. So this is all handheld. I basically shoot straight up to my eye and I just move my body to create these kind of shots in 100p. So it's nice and smooth. So these shots actually they're quite fast. And that's why we use the slower frame rates. But do you see how dynamic it can make your video? And that's without gimbals. People go, oh, you must use gimbals as movement. You don't have to. This is the freedom you get from using these type of cameras. And then, so in this first shot, what we're actually doing is I've basically locked on the focus on the face. I've moved away and then slid into focus. And then this one is just tracking as you go. So it's two different ways to use it. But yeah, it's all about adding emotion, adding interest. So one of the things we say, so when somebody's shooting, basically use your camera like you're a photographer. So the frame you want to capture, so a lot of people, they'll pick up their camera and they'll just go, we're filming this, and then we're filming that. And that's not cinematic. And that's where a lot of people go, they'll do moves that they think is what videographers would do. But it's very much, the change in the industry is that this is the type of stuff you couldn't do this back in the day. Like having focus track as you're moving, like that would have been a 3-person job. And these cameras have changed the industry in that way, which is it's great. And it just allows such a different workflow. So a little tip, this is one of the favorite things I say, if you're using the screen, wear a strap. And so if you basically hold the strap tight, because that will give you 3 points of contact, which pretty much smooth footage. Same way, if you're using your eye up to the face, you're using your body to keep the footage smooth. And that's what it's all about. It's like getting high quality video is just you know, it's a smooth and nice motion. Also, don't be afraid. So, a lot of photographers, it's f2, f2.8, f4, because you need, in that 1 second, you need to capture the moment. The joy of video, it's a completely different format where the moment's happening. We're capturing the whole thing. So each frame, that, as the focus moves, so it's all about, you don't have to be as safe. I pretty much stay on 1.4 all day unless I know I need more depth, if that makes sense. So it's just, it's one of those things that I do photography as well, and I have to switch my thinking. Because I'll be shooting 1.4 and go, oh, one of their eyes is in focus. So it's one of those things that you have to think about differently, but it's definitely, to get this sort of look, that's how we generally do it. Cool. Another way we do is, so this is using movement for transitions, which is very much part of our style. So when you drop your camera, you might think, cut it off. There's so much you can do, and there's so much creativity now. There's no rules. You can do whatever you want. And this is the kind of stuff we just love to do because it's just interesting. Yeah, it's really cool. I think it's cool. Cool. We use, so if you've got a Sony, you all should know what, feel free to take photos. So I personally am colorblind. I'll say that right now. Jackson does all our color grading. But this is the profile. So we've got two setups. We use either Cine 4 or we use S-Log 3. And you need to know why to use them. I use Cine 4 all day long for everything until you get to like a sunset or something with that, just that really bright background and you want to save it. And we've got some examples to show you. So this settings, most of our friends, we all use the same thing. We all shoot for each other. This is 5 years of trialing to find the best settings that work with. So as I said, everything we do, might not be the correct or the best way to do it, but this is how we do it, and we've been doing what we do successfully for 5 years, and you know, so this is what we suggest, and it definitely works. We'll show an example. Okay. So you'll see. So you see the difference. So Cine 4 it runs in so much less, it's much less contrasty and just grabs that dynamic range. So yeah, so you can see the difference. I think Cine 4 is pretty light on, so it doesn't change it too much, but it just grabs those highs and just saves them and makes them a lot sweeter, which is something that we definitely care a lot about. Which is why we also use zebras and peaking. So pretty much we set our zebras to 100 plus. Does everyone know what zebras are? No. Okay, so on the camera, zebras is your overexposure guide. So if you turn it to 100, it's white and black striping. So if you turn it on, you'll see that. And pretty much I will shoot everything so there's no zebras. So that's my guide. But once you get used to them, do not forget to turn them back on. Trust me. Because you'll shoot everything bright going, everything's great. When sometimes it's not. Luckily, the Sonys have such dynamic range. So on the Canons, what do we use to push the stops?
We could go maybe half a stop either way.
Yeah, so we'd push our expose about half a stop either way. With these, we do 2...
Down about 2/3 of the stop, push about 2.5 stops.
Yeah, so there's just so much range in there, and it definitely makes a big difference, which you don't get if you're not in Cine 4. That's just how it works. And then with S-Log, there's our S-Log settings if people want to take photos. So this is the much more dramatic change, as you'll see. Things with S-Log though is it does add in a lot of noise. So you do have to noise reduce, but that's all part of it. That's part of the job. We noise reduce quite a few of our clips, and just keeps them looking nice and clean. We'll show you an example. So you can see the color change when it turns on, and you just see how flat that is, especially with this one. So in Cine 4, we had a Cine 4.
What's the compression? Is it after post-processing, before post-processing?
Yes. So straight out of camera, and then that's once it's graded in post. So we shot that in Cine 4, and I could see, and I was like, we can't recover it, so I shot that in S-Log, and you can just see, you just receive all the color detail back, which is just, it's cool, because you can do things that you couldn't do before.
So do you find that Cine 4 gives you less noise than the S-Log?
Yes, definitely. So S-Log, I think it's 3200, 1600 ISO. So yeah, so if it's bright daylight and you're in S-Log, you've got to shoot a minimum of 1600 ISO, where Cine 4 goes down to 200.
I'll say this, that this next shot, which is in, like, it's a sunset, but it's still a fairly bright day, I had to noise reduce. Even though it's, you know, there was plenty of light. Just the nature of the beast. It's the trade-off of, we want to capture that wide colour palette, we want to capture that wide dynamic range. There has to be trade-off, unfortunately.
And what do you use to noise reduce? Is it
Neat video. Yeah. Which the new Neat video has just come out, and it is insane. So it's definitely worth looking at. Cool. This was the next biggest change for us as well. So this shot here, that's 20,000 ISO. It's noise reduced, that's 12,000 ISO. And I think the last one's about between 6 and 12. So you can just see, like, there's just such a difference in, we couldn't do this stuff before. You couldn't capture this shot with our old gear. But the ISO, it's just changed everything for us. Like, we don't shoot anything over 12. 12,000 is our kind of limit, but at 20,000 to get a shot, because there's no light there. That was light from the reception, which was, you know, 15 meters away.
Are they lit there?
No, that's just sparklers. The joy of sparklers. The tunnel's not as nice. Yes, Mark Clarice.
Quick question.
Yes.
Just in regards to using S-Log,
Yes.
and used to overexpose, do you generally go that
It's a
way?
great question for Jackson.
It depends what I'm trying to capture. So if I know that I need to capture face detail, I will overexpose generally by a stop or two. If I'm trying to capture the scene as it is, I won't overexpose. Because I know that I'll just throw that extra information away. And by overexposing 2 stops, you're losing 2 stops of dynamic range. So it's all well and good to shoot it, but you might as well have just shot it in one of the less dynamic range footage that you don't have the drawbacks of having to noise reduce and the more processing that you have to do in post.
It is a lot more work to use S-Log. And that's
Probably takes me about 4 times the amount of time to get a decent shot with S-Log than it does with Cine 4.
But as you can see, sometimes it's really worth it, especially during sunsets. There's those kind of, because the thing is, the couple see the photographer's shots. They see that glorious, that light, that with video, until recently we couldn't capture. Now the playing field, it takes a lot more work, but it is closer. Cool, so I'm just going to go through just a few tips. Shutter speed. Does everyone know what shutter speed does? Pretty much. So pretty much for video, it's very different than for photos. There's a rule, and I'll bring this up so you can see this. So whatever your number is with the P next to it, so if you're at 25, 50 or 100, double your frame rate to get correct shutter speed. Does that make sense? Yes?
So shooting 100p, my shutter speed should be about 200?
200. Yeah. Yeah. So whatever the number is, you double, and that's how you get nice motion blur. So if you go, so that's the rule. I break that every single day, but I break it in a way because I know I can. So if you're shooting anything fast moving, any fast motion, if you've got a high shutter speed, everything will look jittery. And you'll try and work your work, why does my footage look weird? That's when you have to add in an ND filter, which, yeah, just brings that down. But yeah, so the general rule is keep as close to double as you can. Don't go under it and kind of thing. And then, yeah, so pretty much we start with our shutter speed where we want it. F-stop as low as I can go, and then ISO to match. So shutter speed, so it's somewhat correct. I want that nice, soft, shallow depth of field, so we'll go 1.4, 1.8, f2, and then, yeah, ISO anywhere up to 1200. So you kind of, it's a different way of looking at it, but it is, it's definitely just takes a little bit of practice. The same thing, we say, try all these frame rates, put them into your editing program and see the difference, especially if you speed. So if you see with our dancing footage that we showed at the start, you notice how everything looks quite fast because a lot of that is shot at 50p, so half speed, and then sped up to normal speed. So those extra frames make everything look fast and fun. So there's just different ways to shoot everything, and it's all about experimenting. But yeah, don't be afraid to shoot nice and shallow. If it's dark, up the ISO. With the A7 III, we go up to 12,800 with no issues, kind of thing. Cool. I think that's pretty much everything. Did anyone have any questions? Yes.
Me?
Yes.
What do you adjust when you have flickering from your lights? Which part do you adjust?
So that's your shutter speed.
That shutter speed.
Yeah, so I will, with a lot of reception venues, which is where we see the worst lights, we'll go down to a 40th or a 30th, basically, which is very slow, and it can leave you with your footage being like your ghost on your fingers and stuff. So if you, it's fine detail, but the whole thing's not doing this. At that point, I'll just set it straight back to 25p, because the cameras do limit how low your shutter speed can go. So if you're shooting 100p, it won't let you go under 100. Kind of thing. That's the originals did, but it's a great tool now they've done that. So in anything with flickering lights, go down to 25, and just 40 is normally what works. So a 40th. Carlo.
Your grading is pretty phenomenal. Just quickly, in terms of your post-production, obviously, like grading takes a bit of time to do.
Yep.
Are you showing an ungraded version of the edit to the client before you then go on and lock the edit?
Never.
You just grade it and then.
Yeah. So our whole thing is we tell our clients so they're not corporate clients. It's very different for us. Basically, if they want something changed, we'll change it. It very rarely happens. But if you give them the option, you say, hey, this is unfinished, watch it, they'll come back and go, oh, it's unfinished, we'll change all these little things. And then about 2 weeks later, they go, can you put it back to the way it was because it was better? I've had that happen. And it's very frustrating. But yeah, with grading, Jackson, how long does it take you to film like a 5-minute film?
So a 5-minute film, I'll probably spend anywhere between 4 to 12 hours on. Just we're not talking about edit. Jack does all of that. That
Yeah.
takes him a couple days. But just I will sit down, going through every shot, making it match the shot before, the shot after, and make sure it's got a whole consistent feel.
Which is very hard in the style because we are very non-linear. So when you're jumping from bride prep to reception to match all that is it's a tough job. But that's all part of the storytelling, which is what we love to do.
What sort of grading software do you use?
So we don't leave Final Cut. We edit in Final Cut 10, and so we use the built-in color board on Final Cut. But the main tool that we use is Film Convert, which is basically a film emulation software.
We love film.
I love film. I've been shooting film since I was in primary school. What Film Convert does is it's got all of the different camera settings. And how that relates to different film stocks. So it gives me a very good starting point of what I want the footage to look like. With a varied different stock, we tend to use a Fuji stock for our colour and an Ilford stock for our black and white. But yeah, that's what we use, and we've been using it quite successfully.
For 5 years.
Noise reduction software.
So noise reduction, we use Neat Video.
Neat Video.
Yeah. It's wizardry. I don't know how it does it.
It's a slightly painful process. It is quite slow. You can't watch it back until you've exported it because it's doing its magic.
2 frames a second is how long it takes to render each frame.
But it is, it's definitely worth having.
Hi, I've got 2 questions.
Yes.
How do you get over the 29 limit recording time?
Yep.
And overheating?
Cool.
When you're doing ceremonies?
Yeah, totally. Luckily, most ceremonies are under that, which is great. We just stop and start. So our whole setup for ceremonies, we have 2 cameras at the back on 1 tripod. So we use what's called magic arm and a super clam. So we'll have a zoom and then a wide, and then Jackson will go at the front. So our whole thing as videographers, because photographers a lot of the time hate videographers, and we deal with this a lot. People will, the photographers at the back, wedding photographers are laughing. Basically, they've worked with somebody who stood up the front, who walked around the couple and all these things. For us, especially weddings, the day is so much more important than us. So our whole thing is we stay well out of the way. So we've got long zoom lenses. But yeah, at 25 minutes, 22 minutes, I'll just stop and start, especially Greek Orthodox, Catholic, the long ones.
And because he's got the 2 cameras, he can stagger it. So he can stop one while the other's recording, start that.
Yeah, so there's never any pauses. Saying that, with overheating, I love the A7 IIIs. I have not had one overheat yet.
The biggest thing, battery grips.
Yes.
Batteries get hot when they discharge. So pulling the battery out of the actual camera body and into its own sled has been the biggest thing. We've never had a Sony body overheat on us at a wedding, ever.
No. And this is,
We've shot
sometimes
43 degree days.
Yeah, sometimes people talk for 2 hours during the speeches. And it's they just keep going. And so it's that, and camera. Also, the next thing you do is just always have the screen out, because this gets hot. Like after 43 degree, like 40 minutes, you don't want to put this up to your face, but it doesn't overheat. It never stops. That's the key.
Also, the heat sink for the sensor is directly behind the screen, because that's where the sensor is. Letting airflow flow through there.
Yeah, and apart from that, in the internal settings, set it to high heat. So there's 2 settings for your warnings. There's low and high. I remember I updated my software and it changed once, and I was shooting, I'm like, whoa, I've got a warning, and then I'm like, oh, it's just set to low, you know. But we've had these things running. The old ones, yes, like we used to have A6300s, and 4K would last a few minutes in those because they're so hot, but they've fixed that with these, and that's why these are so good, because now we don't have to worry about that. Like, that was a stress. I'd have an umbrella, over my tripod, but we don't have to do that kind of stuff anymore, which lets us leave the cameras and go do what we need to do.
One more question.
Oh.
Sorry, just a quick one. Do you shoot your weddings at 4K or HD?
So we shoot at HD just so we can shoot in slow-mo.
Yeah.
I'm sure there will be a day, Chris, you're listening, that where Sony gives us more than that. And he's hiding. And we will when we can, but for me, slow-mo is just, it gives me, like, I don't need gimbals, I don't need monopods. That's how we get away with all the extra gear, and we just walk around and just do what we want to do. And just, it makes everything quicker. So you walk around, you just, something's happening, you just, you know, just focus on it instead of going, oh, got to change the, you know, it changes the whole kind of, workflow of your shooting.
I think you really need to ask the question.
I was just going to ask, do you use like a handheld rig at all? Like,
No.
Or is it just all
Camera?
handheld?
So literally, so I've got, we use 2 cameras each. I don't wear glasses when I'm shooting, all day, just holding the camera like that. So all those movement shots you saw at the start is just, you know, just moving back and forward, or with the screen, you got the strap on the bottom and hold it tight. And doing that, you got 3 points of contact, and that gives you smooth footage.
What about walking? Are you walking with the camera?
Yeah, that's so
I'm smoother than he is. I just hold the strap out.
big steps. So, because what we do is quite fast. So between steps, that's where I get my best footage for walking. I think.
Yeah, so what I'll do, that we'll have questions, but it's exactly 10 minutes to 2. So I wanted to just say a big thank you to Jack and Jackson. That was extraordinary. So much information.